El Soul of Detroit.
Sweeping down upon the underworld to smash gangland comes the friend of the unfortunate, enemy of criminals. A mysterious, all-powerful character was a problem to the police. A crusader for law. In reality,
M.L. Elric, investigative reporter.
Loved by everyone, but suspected by none of being the
Soul of Detroit.
As
The Soul of Detroit.
he hides behind a strange mask and a suit of impenetrable blue chain armor, flexible as silk, but stronger than steel.
You asked it around your truck around my face. It's gone.
What are you doing?
That is not paid for by them. That is paid for by the people of Detroit.
You might be qualified, ML.
I'm not qualified for this job.
Let me tell you something. You want to go right now? Okay? You want to go right now?
Breaking news from the Red Shovel Network studios. We were going to start with a heartwarming tale about the tearful reunion between Monkey Mobile Mel and the Drew and Mike show. But instead, we are here to announce guilty verdicts on all counts in the Whitmer kidnapping plot trial. Being reported right now by my wife, Teresa Baldus, at Freep.com, and probably by some scrubs who work for some other news organizations. But we do have a topic on this in our reader feedback at the end of the show from someone who asked what Sean and I might say when these guys were acquitted. So I guess we'll continue.
It's a conspiracy.
In the theoretical world. Well, actually, it is literally a kidnap conspiracy, so they've been convicted of being part of a conspiracy. And this is one of those...
It's a we didn't go to the moon conspiracy.
Well, no.
That's what a listener thinks, right? Well, we'll get to that.
Perhaps, but I mean, this is now actually the rarest of things, a bona fide conspiracy. A jury has found them guilty of conspiring to kidnap the governor. So we're going to talk about that. Mark Fellhauer's here, Sean Windsor you just heard, and our special guest is Michael Bellata, former federal prosecutor who now defends some of the very turds he tried to put away. That's kind of weird. But no, I mean the people seeking justice just from the other side of the...
He has a way of doing that, doesn't he?
Could be any of us.
Is that
Exactly. Question
that's
your
not the
character as he
branding? Is
compliments
that
you.
what... But Michael's here to talk about...
If you're a turd, I'll defend you.
That's right.
What kind of branding is that?
No, just people who find themselves in trouble are looking for good counsel. And Michael is here. He was going to talk about Kwame Kilpatrick and Lee Chatfield and a piece I wrote in the Free Press last Sunday in which Michael was quoted where we were talking about how Lee Chatfield and Kwame Kilpatrick seem to have a little something in common when it comes to nonprofit funds. Mainly that they both had a lot of fun with them. Michael has a fairly nuanced version or view of how that could or could not lead to real trouble with Uncle Sam. And we also wanted to talk a little bit more about this Trump search warrants because Michael's one of those guys who would have been involved in drafting that kind of thing when he was with the U.S. Attorney's Office. But now that we got him here, boy, we got to talk a little bit about this Whitmer kidnap verdict. These guys were on trial last year. 2 of them were acquitted, and 2 of them have now been convicted after a jury couldn't reach a conclusion last time. I know this is coming fast and furious, Michael, but are you surprised?
No, my initial reaction to that is that's a jury because you never know which way they're going to go. You can guess, and I'm certainly guilty of guessing last time that they were going to run into some troubles.
But they did. You were right last time.
But this time I didn't weigh in on it, so I can hide behind the lack of prediction. But no, every verdict is different. With a retrial, what tends to happen is that both sides can look at what was effective and what wasn't effective, and they can also anticipate the other side's moves. And given the way that the prosecution and defense work in criminal cases, it's an advantage for the prosecution in the sense that they never are afforded a preview of the defense case, whereas the defense is always afforded a preview of the prosecution's case by virtue of the discovery rules. So this retrial benefited the prosecution because they could see exactly what the defense was, and go back and say, how could we defeat this witness, this piece of evidence, that piece of evidence? And so I think it worked to the government's advantage here.
Well, the previous trial, too, there were 4 guys, 2 acquitted, and then Barry Croft and Adam Fox, the 2 that were convicted today. It was just those 2. Is that a big difference, too?
Yep, it is, because every defense attorney, from the prosecution standpoint, every defense attorney, what you see them doing from the other side, from the prosecution side, is throwing up smoke, throwing up. I've heard it analogized to when an octopus is trying to escape a predator. They squirt ink and they just try to confuse the issue, and that when you have less defense attorneys in a case to try to confuse the issue and to try to muddy up the facts, that gets in the way of oftentimes of the government's case. And I think that less of that must have happened here because there were fewer attorneys to do so. So I think that also helped the prosecution as well.
Well, when you guys were getting ready to start the Kilpatrick corruption case, you were facing up to 5 defendants, right? There would have been Victor Mercado from the Water Department, Derek Miller from the mayor's office, the mayor's dad, Bobby Ferguson, the mayor's best friend, Kilpatrick. And from what I understand, you could have charged a lot more people. There we go. You could have charged a lot more people and brought them to trial, but there was a decision made to limit it to 5 because you wanted to stay focused. And then you got it down to 3 because Mercado at some point dropped out with a plea agreement. Derek Miller agreed to cooperate. And then with 3 defendants, we still went for 6 months. I mean, that's a lot for a jury to keep straight. And that's a lot of time to ask of people who are making, I don't know, what, $48 a day or whatever the jury daily rate is.
Right, plus a free lunch, usually.
Oh, a free lunch, okay.
Oh, that's nice. We didn't, just to make the record clear, we didn't decide not to charge people because we wanted it to have fewer defendants at trial. What we did try to settle the cases that we could settle so that we didn't have an unwieldy number of defendants at trial. And for the same reason I just explained, less defense attorneys trying to muck up what we thought we could prove to a jury as a clear-cut path to conviction. And so that was definitely good to have fewer defendants. But as far as that case, Mr. Mercado pled, the former director, for those who don't know, of the Detroit Water and Sewage Department, he pled guilty after the trial started for a week or so. And so then it was down to 3, just Bernard and Kwame Kilpatrick and Bobby Ferguson. So that helped our case, certainly.
And even then, you still had, 7, 8 lawyers on the other side? I mean, that's a lot of voices. And you guys had multiple prosecutors, too. But, I mean, it was pretty much you and Chutko leading the charge for Uncle Sam. And then, things can get muddled when there are that many voices, that many people, that many perspectives. So you think going from 4 defendants down to 2 defendants...
That's another thing that helped, yeah.
Also, the Whitmer case.
Yeah, in the Whitmer case. It also gave the jury less to focus on, too, so that their deliberations were less scattered and more focused.
Well, they were 8 hours over 2 days. Does that seem really fast in this?
Well, I would say it's a little fast, but not considering how long this trial was. It was an incredibly short trial, really, for the seriousness of the charges, and the evidence probably that the government could have put on. I bet there was a lot that was left on the editing room floor of the prosecution's case for it to go just, what was it, a week? It was very
and this judge is telling defense attorneys, come on, let's go, keep moving. Stop taking so much time with this crap, which if I was a defense attorney, I'd say, Your Honor, the jury is here when you're calling my arguments crap. I mean, thanks for nothing. But, I mean, this judge moved things through. I mean, how many days was jury selection in the Kilpatrick case? Was it a week?
It was about, I believe it was like 5 days.
Yeah, it was pretty intense. This guy picked a jury in an afternoon, and the judge did most of the screening and missed, the woman whose daughter-in-law got high with Adam Fox when he was scouting the governor's house. They missed that one of the jurors said, I already made up my mind and I can't wait to get picked because I'm going to,
and that juror was kept, I learned.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you.
That is shocking to me. Well, not shocking to me. What happened is probably we only have half of the story. So the half of the story we hear is what the juror said, that they're committed to a certain outcome. But what we didn't hear, and maybe, I don't know if it was reported, maybe I didn't see it, but when it's fairly easy to rehabilitate a juror, in other words, to make a juror no longer an unfair juror by asking just one question. And that question is, despite the way you feel about this, despite everything you read in the media, despite everything, would you be able to perform this mental gymnastics of putting all that aside and deciding this case just based on what you hear in court and the witnesses and the documents? And if you say yes to that question, whether or not that's realistic, then the judge has made his record and the juror is saved and the juror stays and cannot be removed for cause. So,
Do you find that to be terribly realistic? Because I don't, but maybe I'm too cynical.
Well, no, I don't think that people really can put strongly held views aside. I think that's very difficult. So I think judges, and I wasn't there, and I don't want to disparage Judge Junkers certainly, but the judges that I've seen judges a number of occasions. Even when the potential juror says, "Yeah, I can still be fair," the judge will say, "You know what? I know you'll try, but I think your views are too strong here. So I'm going to do you the favor of not putting you in that position. For instance, in DUI case with a homicide, I know you lost a family member to a drunk driver, so I'm not going to put you in that position of judging this defendant who's on trial for killing someone in a drunk driving case."
So if there's a lot of emotion involved. Maybe?
Yeah, there's a lot of emotion. People, they're people, and so when they go into these situations, they bring with them all their experiences and all the trauma that they've had in their life. Now, I know trauma is very popular these days. I like to talk about it whenever I can.
If you were on the prosecution side or the defense side, and you knew going into a case like this that there was a juror who may have told the judge, "Yeah, I know I told everybody I work with that I want to go there and make this happen, but then I told the judge I'll be cool." Would you be comfortable with that?
No. And there's a really easy way to deal with it, which is called a peremptory challenge. You use one of your free challenges. You don't have to remove them for cause. I was just talking about a judge removing someone for cause. In other words, the judge has to excuse them. And just because the judge says, "You know what, I think you could be fair because you answered that one question the right way," I think that most attorneys would not take a risk and say, "Oh, I'm going to keep that juror because they may be leaning my direction." It's just too much of a risk. It's too scary. I wouldn't leave the juror.
But they found out about this juror after the jury had been sworn in. So
Okay.
I think this was a tip
on
that
the
came.
second day, yeah.
Yeah, that somebody called the court and said, "Hey, by the way, the guy on my bowling team says he's going to cook somebody's goose. We just don't know whose goose."
That makes more sense that they ended up on the jury because both sides didn't know. So the judge must have then questioned that juror and gotten to the bottom of it. I didn't read any reports of that.
He had a clerk do an investigation.
Okay.
Yeah, and the lawyers were not privy to that. They were not allowed to sit in on that. They were not allowed to find out what the jury had said. And in this case, there were alternate jurors, so they could have put one or two over the side and said, "Well, we got some spares here."
Yeah, that just raises a huge red flag to me as I now am wearing my appellate attorney hat, saying, that's a huge issue for appeal for these defendants, that they weren't privy to hear what this juror was saying. I'm sure there's a record of it, but the fact that they weren't able to question the jurors and be satisfied with their questions, I think that could be grounds for a mistrial. And I think I'm positive that that'll be one of the grounds if they pursue an appeal.
Which they will.
Yeah, I think they're facing up to life in prison, right? You take every chance. Kilpatrick tried everything he could, including, "I didn't get the lawyers I want, even though I got the lawyers I wanted."
That's right. That's right. So they have an appeal of right, so they can automatically appeal to the United States Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit. That's what will happen next with these two fellows.
Okay. Wow. And in terms of last time there was a hung jury, so we should be clear, they were not acquitted. 2 people were acquitted, which means the jury found there wasn't enough evidence. In the 2 defendants, Adam Fox and
Barry Croft.
Barry Croft, both of whom cleaned up, by the way.
Yeah,
they really
great.
spruced up. I guess it didn't help them so much, but there was a hung jury, which meant some jurors were ready to convict them and some jurors were ready to let them go, or maybe some jurors just couldn't make up their mind and the judge said, you're never gonna land on this one, so we're just gonna have to call it a day. But there was a lot of commentary afterwards, including, I think, from Governor Whitmer saying that, well, it was the jury that was the problem here. I guess Governor Whitmer's probably pretty satisfied with this jury's performance.
Yeah, I think
now.
she's an attorney, so I think she is, isn't she?
And spent a minute as a prosecutor.
Yeah, so you really are not supposed to do that ever. I mean, let alone being the governor. You shouldn't really weigh in on saying that the jury was wrong. Or I mean, you
Politics.
have to. Yeah, you have to respect a jury. You can disagree, and that's what should have been said. It's just I disagree,
Well,
but
not
I
to
respect.
mention that the jurors are her constituents.
There's that too.
Yeah.
she works with them.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, she governs them.
Yeah, like I wouldn't say that to anyone that I work with, or my wife. Anyway,
ML, do you know what the two guys that were acquitted? Like, why are Croft and Fox so different from the other two?
Well, my understanding is it's because they were more fully involved in everything that was happening. Whereas the other two guys might not have been there for the recon or might not have been there for some of the practice invasions and things like that. And they may have been there for some, but not all of them. But as I understand it, Croft and Fox were there for all of the major acts. And so this notion of, they said they're going to scout the governor's cabin, but I didn't go for that. I thought that was a bunch of shit. I think that was what the two guys who walked said. And there was some interest in having them testify, but they declined. I think Fox and Croft's lawyers wanted them to testify, but they both declined on claiming the Fifth Amendment because they thought whatever they said, they may be charged maybe in state court with some of the things that they spoke about. And I think and Michael, correct me if I'm wrong, that if they did testify and said, we didn't do nothing wrong, the prosecution could come in and just start, hammering them with all kinds of stuff that they might not have such handy answers for.
yeah, the way if the government wanted them to testify, by the way, they could have forced them to. They would have had to give them immunity, but you can do that.
All crimes, right?
No, just what's called 6001 immunity, which is by law, and that immunity says that nothing that they say can be used against them in that trial if they testified, but also you can't, and this is the big part of it that people sometimes miss, it also includes something called derivative use immunity, which means if whatever they say in that trial leads to other information, it could be finding real evidence, documents, anything, that's also cannot be used against them. So that's it's very complete immunity. Even though it's not transactional for any crime, it's basically transactional for this case.
But that's at the federal level. Could a state prosecutor hear that and say, "Oh, well, it sounds like there's a weapons charge here," or you?
I don't think so. I think once given the federal immunity, I think that's a defense against use in a state case.
Wow, that's pretty handy.
Are conspiracies, are these the hardest ones to prosecute, a conspiracy?
Yeah, I think we talked about that maybe last time we talked about this. And that is because it's not a completed crime in this case. In this particular case, most conspiracy charges, you have a completed crime. You have people selling drugs, agreeing to sell drugs, that's a conspiracy. And then you have shipments of drugs, right? So you're actually doing it. The problem with this case that I think that made it so hard was that you have a conspiracy charged that no one ever did. No one ever kidnapped the governor. They did lots of things leading up to it, but they never went through with it. So the question always was, did they really intend to do it? Or were they just enjoying themselves during COVID, doing their being their wacky selves?
Yeah, some harmless goofball potheads who had nothing better to do. But one of the things that was, I thought, really interesting, and I heard some of the testimony is, basically, listening over Teresa's shoulders because it turns out our kitchen is the Free Press's East Side Bureau. But she was monitoring the trial remotely. But the judge said to the jury, because entrapment was a big element of the defense, the judge was pretty explicit in saying, if you plan to do this, if you want to do this, and somebody gets involved and says, yeah, let's do this, but you had the will to do this, it is not entrapment. Even if I recall what he said, even if they, further the conspiracy a little bit, does that sound right?
So for entrapment, there's two things that the government has to prove to get rid of to beat the entrapment offense. One is they have to show that they could show that the person was predisposed. Okay, so if you show that somebody already was in the business of kidnapping governors, for instance, then there could be no entrapment here. That was the problem that the government ran into in the DeLorean case, because John DeLorean was not a cocaine dealer. He was a automobile creator and manufacturer.
Yeah, father of the GTO, I think.
So So plus
They
you can
came
go
up
back
with
in
that as a
time.
way for him to make money because he
Right.
needed cash.
They knew he was desperate, and they took advantage of that, and they preyed on his, and that was the defense. The government preyed on his vulnerability and said, "You can save your car company, but just sell some drugs." And so that was
Ridiculous.
Yeah, it was ridiculous.
Bad Uncle Sam.
But here, you know, there is no necessarily predisposition, but also it's not just enough to have no predisposition. The government cannot do something called an inducement, and that's a legal term, and that means that the government's involvement has to be so strong that it would make Sean, for instance, normally law-abiding Sean Windsor,
I think.
commit this crime. So it has to be something that, hey, any of us would have done it in this situation if the government did this. Let's say the government came to you and said, or an informant that you didn't know said, look, you know, my son is going to die tomorrow unless I get this medicine. I need you to break into this location. And so you go and say, okay, I'm going to help you. I'm going to go break in because it's the right thing to do. And you go break in, and then it turns out there's no sick child. It was all bullshit. The government made it up. That's entrapment because it makes a normally law-abiding person do something they wouldn't normally do. And that's called inducement. And, you know, so and here it's really hard to say that there was either predisposition, because I don't know that there's any history of these fellows doing similar acts, so you don't really have predisposition. But you could have predisposition prior to when the informants were brought on. In other words, before Uncle Sam was officially involved. And that can be used to show, hey, they were already predisposed to do this before Uncle Sam got involved. So their predisposition is possible, but there's certainly, I don't think, any inducement. I don't think that the government did anything that would make a normally law-abiding person
I would help you, Michael,
plot
if
to
you
get-
needed me to break in.
Oh, thank you. My son's fine for
I just
now,
wanna
but
put-
thanks for
I mean,
asking. If
for
somebody-
anything, any reason. Yeah.
What about me?
You too.
Oh, what about ML?
Yeah, absolutely.
I thought we were going to the plot of a Star Trek movie there for a minute there, the one with Benedict Cumberbatch, where they had the kid who was sick and they had to heal him, but the kid really was sick and they
Right.
they had to use some of Khan's blood to save him. But anyway,
That was not entrapment.
yeah, no. But so it sounds like it's the difference between the government saying, "Hey, who wants to start a band?" and the government answering an ad that says, "We have a band and we're looking for a drummer."
Yeah, yes and no. I mean,
yeah, nice analogy.
I'm not sure about the analogy, but
Terrible.
I will.
I tried to keep it short, but I don't bill every 6 minutes.
Since when?
People are saying it's a beautiful analogy.
Yeah, people are
saying
Some people are saying it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Sounds like one of those movie reviews. You know, some people are saying it's a feel-good hit of the summer.
Yeah.
Where's Rex Reed when we need him? So okay, so you're not surprised by the verdict then?
No, I mean, I'm not surprised that the government was able to prevail the second time around. It was easier for the reasons that I explained, and then there's always the huge issue of what is this particular jury going to do when you mix these personalities together, the viewpoints they came in with, whatever they glean from the evidence, and how they react to each other. Because a lot of times, the chemistry between individuals in a group dynamic is really what determines the outcome. So they start off and they take a vote, for instance. Let's take a straw poll in this jury. I had a case recently that happened, and if the jurors are all in favor of one, let's say acquittal, you have 11 of the jurors want acquittal right off the bat, then you kind of know how it's gonna go, and then maybe it starts off that way, but the one holdout is a very charismatic person.
Henry Fonda.
Yeah, exactly. So
Did you make some coffee? No, you don't get that reference.
Yeah,
I thought you were serious. I could.
was that the Lee J. Cobb line? Or?
Yeah, after being in the hot desert all day.
Yeah. It's been a while since I saw the movie.
Did you make some coffee? Yeah.
Now, this trial has not been the best for the FBI, right? We've seen agents not able to testify because one was an assault charge they had.
One assaulted his wife because she didn't want to participate in a swingers party, and another guy was accused of using his involvement in the case to help further a side business that he had, like a security consulting business. So one of I guess the husband of the reluctant swinger, or the would not be swinger, was the star witness during the preliminary examination when they were laying the case up, but we never saw him take the witness stand because I think the government said, yeah, you're gone.
So a lot of people see this case and want to say, wow.
The jury never saw that, by the way. The jury never saw the preliminary exam. That's just for the lawyers and the judge and all of that.
But us people that follow the stories and follow the reporting see this and go, wow, look at what the FBI is doing. That seems shady. Or, January 6th, look at what the FBI is doing. I mean, is this, to you, Michael, and following this case, does it seem like this is normal FBI operating procedure?
The idea that there can be a particular agent that has some misconduct in their past, I mean, that happens. It's not that common, quite frankly, with federal agents, in my experience, versus local police. I didn't see it as much in my couple decades with the government. So it is a little bit unusual, but the way they handled it the way that the government handled their agent having those problems was very, very pedestrian and normal. They excised the problematic agents out of the case because a case is always bigger than any one particular agent because there's other evidence or else there wouldn't be a case. So they relied on the other evidence. They used other FBI agents and they used witnesses and video, etc. They didn't need those agents, and so that's why their personal foibles did not become part of the trial because it was irrelevant to the trial.
But outside of the courtroom and what you've read and how they've acted, are we led to believe that this is just how agents and informants work? Or does this seem unusual just simply based on the reports that you've seen?
Based on the reports I've seen, the number of informants, I think is very unusual that they had that many informants. It seems like they had more.
Is that because the governor's involved? Why?
Those are decisions that are made at the case agent level. How should we best investigate this case? And so they must have thought there was some utility to get additional informants, maybe because of how you were describing earlier, how sometimes some of them would go to things, to events and planning events, and sometimes they wouldn't, so they needed to have people, informants. But usually when you're dealing with an informant, it's one informant. It's usually one informant, maybe two, not this bevy of informants in this case.
And one of the informants said that they became an informant after they realized that these guys wanted to kill cops. And if I understand it correctly, this informant was not real keen on the governor, but when you were killing law enforcement, their feeling was, okay, wait a minute now. I'm a veteran. I respect the law. And, I think it was Croft who was telling these guys, hey, does anybody want to kill a cop up in Maine? Because this guy had pissed him off because he'd done something. So there were a lot of, I think, corollary issues where people who were down for whatever at some point said, ooh, now we're doing this and we're doing that. It's like, I may take a little pause for poise here. But I think one of the things Mark may have been getting to, Michael, is we see right now, led by Donald Trump, a war on the FBI. And now we have a case where people think the FBI is setting people up, that they're fomenting, fake rebellions, and that they're behind January 6th. And then we see, with no evidence to support that. But then we do see some FBI folks who had some character issues here. And now we have the FBI being accused of maybe planting evidence at Mar-a-Lago.
And I think a lot of that comes from because the people at the top are political appointees, right? The Attorney General. Well,
I think Comey, didn't help the FBI too much with some of his handling of the Hillary Clinton stuff. But does when you started as a federal prosecutor, I imagine the FBI was sort of seen as the Jimmy Stewart FBI as opposed to now, which is, I don't know what the hell it's seen as, the Cheech and Chong FBI or whatever the hell it.
Yeah.
Does that concern you?
It is. It's very concerning because.
And is that something you can use as a defense attorney now?
Yeah, but I'm in a particular case, I would obviously focus on that agent. It may the whole anti-FBI sentiment might be helpful to as a defense attorney, but as a citizen, as a taxpayer, I'm really disheartened by this, by the attempts by Donald Trump to use the FBI, because it's just another one of his plays from his playbook of just blame the people investigating me, and it's been nice during my career, at least. And I actually listened to the last show, and I think you had Ellen Langell on, who worked for the Washington Post for many years, and he said that he couldn't recall a single time. I mean, I think he's been in the business for around 40 years.
He's very old.
Yeah, he's very seasoned, I like to say.
Oh, yes, wise.
Nice.
And he said that he doesn't know of a single instance where an FBI agent was alleged to have planted evidence. And that was always my feeling, that they were the top of the top, the cream of the crop of any kind of law enforcement, even more so than their brother federal agencies like DEA and the other agencies, Customs certainly. And so the FBI stood head and shoulders above everybody else, that you could count on them, notwithstanding some of the things that were done back in McCarthyism days with Hoover and et cetera. But for the most part, you could trust the FBI. So now, to me, it smacks of desperation. I still believe in the Department of Justice. I still believe, although I've learned a lot as a defense attorney since I've left, that not everybody prosecutes the way that I think they should, and not everybody takes the decision to charge or to dismiss charges as seriously as I feel like I did and the people that I respect in the department do. So I do run across occasionally assistant U.S. attorneys even and agents that in my view aren't comporting with those high ideals that the FBI has always at least aspired to, if not embodied. And so it is disheartening to see this trend, and I'm hoping it's just a short-lived trend, and then we get past this. And keeping the department apolitical this points out how very important it is, and that's why the one good thing that I'm drawing from the whole controversy now with Mar-a-Lago is at least the public distance that the White House is purporting to put between them and the department, because I think that's essential. If you don't have that, then we devolve to a banana republic where we are doing things like even Ukraine has done in the past, where they prosecute the former president. And also, they've prosecuted former prosecutors who prosecuted people. So if you are a prosecutor in Ukraine, for instance, and I know this because a friend of mine served with the Department of Justice in the State Department over there for many years as a legal advisor, and he told me that, you get prosecuted as a prosecutor over there. So keeping prosecutors, federal prosecutors, and the FBI, at arm's length from the White House, I think is critical, because you can't investigate the White House. And when I've gone overseas to talk to other prosecutors about their system, I've gone over to talk at the Marshall Center over in Germany, and there I spoke with I lectured to about 160 different countries, and there's only 200 countries in the world. So we had representatives, like top law enforcement people from all these different countries, and to a person, the thing that they were most amazed at by the United States and our system is that we could prosecute and investigate politicians, people that had power. That is unheard of in so many countries. We don't realize that, and that is because of this separation of powers, and it's because that that the White House traditionally has not put a finger on the scale of justice in the Department of Justice. And
But people will say.
So that's a yes. You're concerned.
But people will
Very.
say.
Okay.
People will respond to that and say, but yeah, even though the judicial branch is separate, look at what the judge down in Florida, look at who he donated to, because we have so much information. And the judge, which I found this interesting, the judge in this Whitmer case, I believe, was appointed by George W. Bush. I mean, we know who they're appointed by, so it just kind of opens that door.
Yeah.
Well, the head of the
conspiracy.
FBI is Christopher Wray, who was put there by Donald J. Trump.
And so was the judge who signed the warrant, right? But I want to get back to you for a second, Michael, what you said about hope for the change, or this is just a blip. Because I think what Trump has shown, Ron DeSantis of the world, is you can just say what you want and it'll stick if you have any kind of cult of your personality, right?
Yeah.
And that's why I worry that it's not a blip. Because Trump's kind of showing a path. If you have any kind of charisma at all and you hammer something over and over, right?
I still think he's unusual, though.
But he's not going to be the last.
I think he's really good at it. No, he won't be the last, but I think he's really good at it.
He is really good at it in a sociopathic way, but
It's like our government is now becoming entertainment. Entertainment, social media, it's all seeping into every aspect of public life. of elected
Well, everyone
representatives.
always says everything's politics now. It's like, no, everything's entertainment now.
But anytime
totally
Ronald
agree.
Reagan did some of this to some degree, right? Not that we need to go back and,
He did.
and litigate
Putting
that.
the people in the audience when he would do his State of the Union.
or just
and
he would say
dramatize
certain
everything.
things, and because he had a charisma his own different from Trump, right?
Well, Kennedy.
The whole idea that just go get what you can and screw everybody else. He didn't say it
a lot
in
of
that
people
way.
say
but-
Kennedy won because he was more charismatic.
Absolutely,
on
go back to
television.
Kennedy beating
Yeah.
Nixon in that way, but it's the same with Reagan. I mean, the ideas that stuck in the '80s were because of him. Some.
I almost don't want to ask because the whole Trump raid thing kind of bothers me because we don't know. There's just so much we don't know. But are you surprised? Are you surprised that they got a warrant to get documents from Mar-a-Lago?
Not surprised. So what I will say is I think that doing a search warrant at Mar-a-Lago is the very last thing that Merrick Garland wanted to do. I really think that his hand had to be forced, and the people that are out there saying no, this is just the Democrats because they're in power going after the former president because he was a Republican. They didn't agree with him. That's completely misguided, I believe, because I believe that Merrick Garland, from everything that I can tell, he was somebody that was vetted to become a Supreme Court justice, and he was not particularly controversial. And so I believe that he is trying to keep the department separate from doing the bidding of Joe Biden and the Democrats. And he doesn't want to be in this position to be seen that way because he understands the value of the Department of Justice reputation, and that's really all they have. They could have all the agents in the world, but if they don't have the trust of the people, if they don't have that reputation for being independent and for really being a Department of Justice, then they had nothing. Then all these years of doing the right thing means zero. And so that's what I'm hoping that does not happen. And I hope that Merrick Garland maintains that separation. And so far, it seems like President Biden is abiding by tradition in that way.
Let's back up for a second because you talked about the Justice Department being independent, but then you said Merrick Garland's hand was forced. Who would force his hand if he's independent?
I'm sorry, I should clarify that I believe that the situation and the facts forced his hand. From what I can
So
tell,
he had no choice.
Yeah, exactly.
If you wanted to follow the law, right?
If he wanted to follow the law, if he wanted to, so I think someone said this. I don't know if it was you, Sean, or
It was probably Mark.
Alan on the last podcast, but he doesn't want to be viewed as making any kind of political decision. And he wants it to be based on he's doing it because he has to do it.
Well, if it is political, it's a terrible political decision. It only helps him.
Exactly.
It only helps Trump.
It would be the most basic and obvious political move that you could even think of to do this. So it doesn't seem to be political. And I think the point that was made was it's more political to do nothing. And that's because you have to ignore evidence of a crime to do nothing. So as much as it would be nice, probably, and this in my view, if there wasn't so much evidence for instance, for Biden to just pardon Trump and say, you know what, let's heal the country, let's move forward, just like Ford did to Nixon. I would like that just because I'm so sick of all this nonsense. It's not helping, solve any problem that we have in this country. So I would like to see that, but I also am someone who was a federal prosecutor for a long time. I believe in the rule of law, and I think that when push comes to shove, you can't overlook something so obvious because then other future presidents and if the president can do it, anyone can do it. So this is the lowest bar that you have to clear. If you allow it to happen for the president, then I think it applies to everybody.
It's a conundrum, right? Because you're talking about the greater good of where the country's at. I'm curious what Mike and Mark think about that. What do you think about the idea of Biden pardoning Trump? Let's say it gets to a certain point and there's some evidence that comes out, and then Biden says, okay, I'm going to pardon you because I'm looking at the bigger, longer picture and the simmering pot that we're in and starting to boil.
I think we probably need to have him accused of a crime before there's a pardon mentioned. So
No, right, but I said some evidence comes out and there are charges or whatever, and he pardons them.
Look, he's still a former president. I'm sorry, that does afford you different, I guess, respect, or it's just a bonus to be a former president. But if it's improper handling of federal records, I don't know. I mean, I don't know.
It's not worth. It's not worth it. In my view, that's
I
not
don't
worth
think
it.
he'll. No, why bother with it?
Because look at
Why bother
a
charging
local
him with it?
case.
And I think that's what a lot of people feel like. If this is just, hey, he just took records. Okay, now you got him back.
Do you
Whatever.
remember when
there is a
Jeffrey
charge.
Feiger? Do you remember when Jeffrey Feiger got indicted for contributing illegally to John Edwards' presidential campaign?
Basically bundling campaign contributions.
Yeah. Was it technically illegal? Absolutely.
Sure.
Was it going to bring any good to anything to have this protracted trial where they brought Jerry Spence's corpse out of retirement? sorry, Jerry Spence. But I mean,
I got it.
Did that really do anything? No. You wasted a lot of money. It was a stupid prosecution because it was a technical crime.
And who was harmed?
And nobody was harmed, exactly. It was just a waste. And so I think if I were Merrick Garland and there was some technical violation not done to provide information to the Russians or to do something that was true espionage, then I would let it go. And I would just say it's just not worth the cost.
I feel like he just probably would show people like, hey, check out this letter that Kim Jong-un sent me, you know?
Well, that's right. That's what he cares about is how does it make him look cool?
Sure, and maybe, you know,
So why didn't he
technically
return it?
that's illegal because he
was
wants to
asked
show
over and over
people
and
the
over.
letters that Kim
No,
Jong-un
but why didn't he
sent
return
him.
for the last year, however long he's been asked?
No, I don't know. I can't answer that. That doesn't make sense. That
Right.
unless he just didn't care and didn't spend any time.
They've been
on it.
asking him for him for, what, a year?
Yeah, oh yeah.
So why not just return him?
Because I've
honestly,
been meaning to clean my gutters for a year.
Exactly.
A lot of other shit I'd rather do first.
I
You know
find
what
it
mean?
amazing that his lawyer would sign off on it, right? Saying that, yeah, we gave you everything.
Well,
I don't
The
think he
client tells you that. That's
Yeah,
what you
exactly.
believe.
That's what I think.
What is the
But I bet
lawyer
you
going to
he-
say, Mr. Ex-President? I'm going to need to go into your personal quarters and start going through all these boxes to make sure what you told me is true. It's like, yeah, I don't think so. You know, but
agree
in
with
terms
that.
of charges, let's find out what the hell the evidence is before we're talking about charges or pardons or anything like. We still don't know.
Yeah.
we know a lot, in my view, from the January 5th committee. I think 6th committee. I think we know that the president was very likely part of a conspiracy.
Well, that's a separate matter from the raid on Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah, to me, the raid is sort of unless that had something to do with something broader. If it's not real espionage, it's not real treason. If it's simply violating some rule with no harm, kind of like the Jeffrey Feiger example.
But again, why go get him then? If it's just that.
Well, possibly.
It doesn't
but
make any
we don't-
sense.
But we don't know.
It must be more than that, I think.
Because the risk to where we're at, just it's not. And I know Democrats are idiots this way a lot of times, but it still doesn't seem they're savvy enough not to do that.
I think
right?
it's ridiculous that you have people
How about that?
celebrating like he's going to be arrested, and then it's ridiculous. So people saying, "Oh no, there's nothing to see here." I mean, they're just the two far extremes. We just don't know.
Well, and Michael, you're right. The January 6th stuff's a lot more worrisome anyway.
Yeah, but the other thing is, you know, is it possible that Trump is such an astute gamesman that he's like, well, they're going to have to come and get it, and if they come and get it, I'm going to blow them up because it's going to look worse for them than it does for me, which we don't know the answer to that. But Michael, what I'd like to ask you is, has there been an instance in your career as a prosecutor where you had to take these aggressive measures to get records and documents that you thought should be produced, but when you got them, you're like, oh, this is the mother lode, and then you start opening the boxes, and you're like, oh, wow, I guess I was expecting more.
I've certainly been overwhelmed before, but usually,
Or underwhelmed.
underwhelmed. I've been underwhelmed before, but usually you have an idea of what you're looking for when you do a subpoena or a search warrant. You have a good idea that it's going to be there. Most of the time, I've gotten more. I've gone had the other reaction. I've found more than I was looking for. But occasionally you strike out. Yeah,
So
definitely.
Again, we're a long way from Florida, but do you think that this may be one of those instances where the feds had a pretty good idea what they're going to get with these search warrants, and that when they get the documents, there may actually be more than they were expecting?
Conjecture, but I would say that's likely. I mean, they likely found something that they didn't know about, because I almost always did.
And then
that was helpful to my investigation.
And then they'll have a big political decision to make, basically,
Exactly.
if we're being real, right, Mark?
Yeah.
It's going to be a political decision.
That's the difference between this and every other search warrant that ever happened. This is the former president. It's never happened before, and it has ramifications to the country for decades and decades to come. You know,
I liked it better when our ex-presidents fought crime, like on Saturday
Or
Night Live.
Bill Holmes.
The
The ex-presidents, that was great. They
Or
were-
Rob Banks, like
Real
with
heroes.
Gary Busey. What was the movie? Keanu Reeves.
Point Break.
Yeah, fun movie.
Oh
Love
God,
it.
yeah,
Love it.
yeah. Although Gary Busey's in trouble again.
I saw that.
So,
Yeah.
well, before we get to my stellar work for the Free Press,
Sorry, it's taking so long. I can't see. I see 56 seconds. That's all I see.
yeah, no, I thought
59
this was
now.
a countdown to ignominy, but we should thank the people who make this show possible. Specifically,
You.
I'd say our donors, but we really only
It's
have one
you.
that we're counting on. But we also have Luke Nowacki and David Hall. And David Hall is he's there to help you take some money out of your house and save some money and do all kinds of.
That's
great
right.
stuff.
They can do a lot of creative things now that rates have, gone up a little bit from their historic lows. You can get the home buying help that you've been looking for from Hall Financial. They have the Buy Smart program, where they help buyers by offering down payment assistance. That's not a bad deal. Multiple benefits from the Buy Smart program. You can receive a credit towards your down payment, receive a better interest than a standard loan, reduce mortgage interest for the first-time home buyers, because housing inventory, they say it's on the rise, so it's a good time to be a home buyer. Talk to Hall Financial right now about the Buy Smart program, 866-CALL Hall, or chat with them online at callhallfirst.com. They also have cash-out refinancing, too, if you're looking for some money to maybe pay off some of those other terrible debts that you have. And when you get that money,
you want to turn to somebody so they can do what I'm doing, which I'm not supposed to do, which is look at the stock market. What's
it doing today? It was terrible yesterday.
It was horrible yesterday. It's down. S&P is down by 0.14%, but really,
A lot of hours left.
this should just be a curiosity, because there are experts who can watch this for you and can give you great advice.
Yeah, one of those guys is Luke Nowacki. Give him a call, 248-663-4748. Luke can tell you if you're in the right investments, equities, bonds, what are you going to do? He'll give you a complimentary consultation. Once again, 248-663-4748. We also have a link on the webpage, too, if you want to get all that information there. Good man, Luke.
Yes, and if you call Luke, he will make it all about you, sweetheart.
Securities and investment advisory services offered through Royal Alliance Associates Inc., member FINRA-SIPC. Royal Alliance Associates Inc. is separately owned, and other entities and/or marketing names, products, or services referenced here are independent of Royal Alliance Associates Inc.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when you call Hall or you talk to Luke, please let them know that you found out about them from our podcast, because they support the whole network, but we like them to know that we're pulling.
And free consultations. It's not one of those things that you maybe check in once a year or whatever.
Yeah, see what they have to say, because if you are getting ready to retire, if you're thinking about retiring long term, this has got to be a nerve-wracking time. So it's good to get some expert advice. Expert advice is how Michael and I connected earlier this month, talking about a little bit about Kwame Kilpatrick at the Bell Ready, and Lee Chatfield.
It always is, that.
Because I had been reading a lot about Lee Chatfield, and we spoke about him on this show, how he was stepping out on his old lady, with a lot of ladies, including his brother's wife, which is kind of sketchy, and then had this nonprofit fund, the Peninsula Fund, where inordinate amount of this money were being spent on entertainment, travel, things like that. These nonprofit funds are perfectly legal. Some people call them social welfare funds. Some people call them leadership funds. But they're basically kitties where you don't know where the money's coming from. You don't know specifically where it's going to. You have some broad categories that explain where it's going. But they're pretty much run without much scrutiny. Michael is one of the few people who have pierced the veil on these funds, looking at the Kilpatrick Civic Fund. And when I was looking at the Chatfield Fund, I said, boy, oh boy, this looks really familiar to me. So I caught up with Michael and Andy Arena, who used to head the FBI office here in Detroit. And basically I said, this looks familiar to me. And Michael said, not so fast, little buckaroo. And I don't know why you called me little buckaroo, but...
Because you're adorable.
Oh, well, Okay, I'll take that. Then. It
prefer-
could have
I
been the
prefer
cowboy
handsome.
boots I was wearing.
Buckaroo.
Maybe it was the ashless chaps. Anyway. Well,
Oh, hey now. Hey.
I don't know.
Okay, so
What was the question?
yeah, just basically,
Why is he a little buckaroo? That was the question.
Okay.
yeah, Lee Chatfield, nonprofit fund, a lot of money, seems to do a lot of traveling. Kilpatrick, nonprofit fund, a lot of money, seems to do a lot of traveling. When you see these two things side by side, how do you determine whether one may be just as dirty as the other?
Yeah, so there's two differences that I can see just from the reports that I've read. With Kilpatrick, we were able to well, we learned through our investigation that people who wanted contracts had to actually pay money in the form of a donation to the Civic Fund to gain favor with Kwame Kilpatrick to get those contracts. So that's one difference off the top. Then the other difference is that, so it was part of the, in other words, for Kilpatrick donating to this 501c4, which is a nonprofit entity that's not a pure charity, that's called a social welfare organization. That's why it's tax exempt under the IRS code. So with Kwame Kilpatrick, people were donating as part of the sort of bribery of Kwame Kilpatrick. They gave money. They didn't care what the money went to, but they wanted to curry favor so they could get a contract. And they were told in not so vague terms that they needed to make those contributions. And so that was different. And the other thing is that what they need to do in Chatfield is they need to do what we did in Kilpatrick and actually go beyond just looking at the stuff that you looked at, ML, on the website, which shows just general expenses, with general categories. They actually have to subpoena the checks from the organization's bank account and see where the checks go. And if maybe the checks are going to pay a credit card, then you go to the credit card and see what those credit card payments were for. Or in Kilpatrick's case, the checks went directly to buy his golf clubs, to pay for his yoga lessons, to pay for trips to to Vail to take Christine Beatty, his lover, away for, his chief of staff away on a tryst.
Going fishing.
Yeah, he was gone. That's what it said on his
Alps
calendar.
Resort.
That's right. That's right. So if they could do that with Chatfield and find specific items that are inarguably personal, and that's the key. And it's just there's no set of rules to decipher. Is this in social welfare or is it not? But it's beyond dispute that if it's purely personal, paying for, let's say that he used the money, Chatfield used the money to buy clothing for a friend of his or his girlfriend or something like that. That's clearly cannot be.
Or a hotel room for one of his trysts.
A hotel room, but see when you get away from something that's so purely personal, like yoga lessons and spa equipment and golf clubs,
right?
When you get away from that and you get into dinners, hotels, then you have to prove the negative. You have to go and say, okay, was there a fundraiser at that hotel? Was there some way they could justify it? Because you have to eliminate, you have to knock down all the possible legitimate, reasons for a very vague organization. So that's the difficulty.
So you need a snitch or you need a subpoena to somehow get into those records, and that's which you had with Kilpatrick, and we don't know yet because you're not with the federal government anymore whether that's happened with Chatfield. I know Sean has a question for you, but I want to ask you just really quickly, because we know that the Michigan State Police have asked for the records related to these funds. What do the feds do when there's a local agency that's investigating something like this? Do they lay back? Do they offer to partner with them? Do they say, hey, little fella, you don't know what you're doing with this. We're the experts. Come on, let's partner up or get the hell out of the way?
Yeah, so that happened recently when I investigated Eric Smith, who's the...
Oh, sure.
That was
Former
the last
Macomb
case,
County prosecutor.
the last case I handled before I left the U.S. Attorney's Office. And so we had a federal investigation of Mr. Smith, including a federal grand jury investigation, that's public information that was going on. And in fact, Mr. Smith ended up getting charged with obstructing that federal grand jury investigation because he was telling, his junior APAs, prosecutors, to lie to a federal grand jury, which is crazy. Can't believe he did that, but he's in federal prison now. But we were doing a simultaneous investigation with the state. They were looking into the forfeiture funds and how that was used or misused, and we were looking into just straight up fraud involving his campaign, which ultimately he was charged with obstructing our investigation into that.
So you wouldn't necessarily say, well, it looks like the state's involved. We'll just sit back. You might say, hey, we're interested, so we're going to do what we do.
Now, more likely, more usually, what happens is when there's a federal investigation, if the federal investigation doesn't yield enough evidence, or at the end of the day, it doesn't look like a federal interest will be served by bringing a case, then I've given cases to the Attorney General's office in Michigan. That's happened before. It happened with Gabe Leland, and that's one of your favorite cases to talk about. So we can.
Yes, the blown kiss.
Too bad I don't have more time because I'd like to hear more about that sushi restaurant.
But when you guys had the two things with Smith, did you guys talk to the AG's office and say, hey, we're doing something, let's not step on each other's toes? You just say,
well, we talked to him, but we have to be very careful because of the grand jury rules. There's secrecy rules in the grand jury, so we can't share any information that we got by a grand jury subpoena or that was from testimony in front of the grand jury.
Okay. Sean, take it away.
I'm not sure there's time at this point. I think we need to let.
No, he's going to make time for you. He's got 2 minutes based on my clock.
You got 2 minutes? All right.
Sean is very
how long are you going to take?
Well, it depends on how long you're winding.
I mean, you already just wasted about 15 seconds.
I know. And I'll try not to be like Mike. Okay, as quickly as I can say, I was sitting at a light.
Just 10 seconds wasted.
Yeah, sorry. I'm sitting at a traffic light this morning, right, in a lane to go straight, and there's a turn lane to me to the left. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, comes a truck, a pickup truck. It's a red light. He weaves around the lanes and the turn, and he goes left through he runs the intersection. He takes the corner too hard, goes up on an embankment, teeters to the right, glass, and his car starts flying everywhere, pieces of it, falls back, teeters back to the left. I think he's going to flip over. Somehow he wobbles and stops.
This is Mike Bellata, not Mike Morse.
No, right. So this all
but
goes
I still
on,
win.
and I can see, all I can see is a guy's arm in the truck. It's 100 feet from me at that point. And it was shocking and startling. Then he tries to speed up, and he's burning rubber and smoke's going. He's trying to go. And all of a sudden, here comes a cop, slow rolling up. So they'd been chasing him. Mm-hmm. Right, and it was, and it took me back to my own accident, and so you start feeling all this adrenaline and so on and so forth.
Are you sure you weren't watching Beverly Hills Cop?
No. So,
just the truck.
10, 15 minutes later, I'm trying to recount it to somebody in my family, and all of a sudden I can't remember the name or the color of the truck. You can't remember these details, and I got to thinking, as a lawyer, when you get witnesses, and it made me realize just how unreliable. Even sitting here talking to you about it, and you would ask me certain details, and I was literally in it. He missed me by a foot. Right? So how do you, this is what you don't have time to answer, but just
but it couldn't have been
dealing
you,
with
though.
witnesses,
The one that was in
dealing with witnesses and the testimony and all that, it's just, and people's memories.
Well, the thing I'll say about that is there's a reason that like 80% of the cases that get reversed or where people are let out of prison that are on death row for being wrongly accused, almost all of those were based on bad witness identifications. Almost none of those are scientific evidence issues. And that's why DNA is so valuable. And so, yeah.
That's why jurors want it too, right?
Exactly. And that's why when people say there's no direct evidence, it's all circumstantial. Ladies and gentlemen, circumstantial evidence is the best evidence because it's objective. It's science.
That reminds me, have you seen Mind Over Murder on HBO? Because I know you and I like to talk about. Oh, okay. Because that's about 6 people that convinced themselves they murdered somebody when they clearly did. And one of the people to this day still believes she was there when the murder happened.
Isn't that something?
She wasn't. No, it's fascinating.
And I couldn't tell you if this truck was black or gray or silver.
That's because you're old.
Michael's got to get back to his
in order
truck
to avoid any other murders of attorneys for not being on time. I got to go.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks for coming in. The other thing is prosecutors lie. They say, we have an eyewitness who can nail your ass to the ground. He remembers the color of the truck, what time it was, and then Sean shows up. That's why they want to plead these guys out, because you get in there, with your coffee stain on your shirt because you freaked out and
I didn't freak out at all. It's just stuff happens so fast, and you're trying to remember what sticks in your brain.
There's no shame in freaking out if a truck almost runs you off the road.
No, what it did do was put me back spinning in Chicago at 70 miles an hour. Yeah, it was a little that adrenaline rush all of a sudden. Even though it wasn't me, it also made me think about you, Mike, because of just this idea of police chases and what it does. I mean, there were a lot of people in that intersection that were really lucky this morning.
Oh, right? Yeah.
Because he was trying to outrun the cops. Now, they weren't screeching after him, but, they were clearly chasing him.
I'm glad you're okay.
This reminded you of me because of my police chase, or because I write about
just-
it?
Wait, you were in a police chase?
No, but just
It was a long
this-
time ago,
Just
1985.
this idea of the weighing, catching that particular person in that moment versus
Maybe
the,
84.
the greater issue of public safety, and maybe they run over somebody or run into. I mean, right? I mean, what?
Well, that's why they have the protocols. That you're not most police pursuits, or there should be very few police pursuits. I mean,
Right.
there has to be a compelling reason that the person who they're pursuing, and each department has a different protocol, but they have to believe that this person is going to harm somebody. It can't just be like, oh, that asshole's not going to pull over, I'm going to get him, because there have been cases where they've chased people and they go through neighborhoods and they jump a curb and they land on a bunch of kids selling lemonade.
Yep.
Or they saw through a bus. I mean, it's not uncommon, which is, hey, listen, we don't want something worse to happen because somebody did something bad, but at the same time, you don't want everybody who's an asshole out there to figure, well, all I got to do is hit the gas because I know they won't chase
no,
me.
it's
I mean,
it's
how
an
do you
interesting.
make that decision?
Yeah, it's an interesting balance, isn't it?
But in DPD, what's supposed to happen, last I checked, is when you're going to initiate a pursuit, a commander or somebody has to authorize it.
See, I knew you would have
Yeah.
lots of interesting
Because, and if
commentary
you
on
don't,
this.
and these cops get in trouble because they're like, we're going after, well, who authorized it? Well, nobody, but, he was going, and that's very.
Well, and how quickly do you go for the authorization? You got to start the chase, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, if somebody's in a Charger and they hit the gas, what are you
Yeah,
going to
you're
wait
not
a
gonna
minute?
no.
A minute later, they're 2 miles away.
How long are you going to wait? That's
What's
tough.
amazing
That's a
too is
tough-
just
tough gig.
how quickly that kind of stuff happens. Have y'all have experienced that to some degree?
What, like
some
a car
level?
accident or something?
Just all of a sudden,
Oh,
here comes a
yeah.
guy running through, and he's trying not to.
Oh, I've pulled a guy over.
What? Wait, what?
Yeah, this was back in.
Did you have a siren that you kept in your?
No, this was in '91.
Put up on top of the hood?
A guy rear-ended me on
TJ Hooker
Outer
over
Drive by 94, and I just gunned it and I got on him and I kind of forced him to pull over to the curb. And it was just a young kid, and he was kind of freaked out. I said, "Just wait here."
Did you yell citizen's arrest?
No. I pulled out my
Zip ties?
my astronaut application, and it had a little badge on. And I said, "Just wait here." And I went to the corner to the house there. And this is in '91 when things were not quite as rough. And I knock on the door, and a guy answers the door behind the burglar bars with a shotgun. And I just said, "I just need you to call the cops. That's all." And he's like, "No problem." I said, "Okay." Wow. Shit. But no, I had a guy who I was coming back from Fox 2 at about 3 or 4 in the morning, because sometimes when I was finishing a project, it took me that long to get it done, and I'm right by my house, and this guy just goes hammering through a red light. If I hadn't hit the brakes, he would have flipped my car. And so I just got behind him. I didn't speed, but I just kind of followed him and kept him in sight and was giving police updates on where they're going. And the dispatcher clearly was waiting for this guy to get outside of Detroit's jurisdiction. She's like, "Okay, well, is he hit Mac yet?" I'm like, no, he's about to. I'm telling you, I want you to send somebody now. And they're like, has he hit Mac yet? I'm like, okay. And the guy ended up pulling into a CVS parking lot. And I was like, well, I'm not going to confront him, but
No, it's just like today.
clearly this person was messed up.
And you got to think about those kind of things. Like today, the accident that he had, and metal, he's dragging metal, and there's sparks, and there was glass flying all over the place. He sits there for 5 seconds, and then guns it again, burning his tires. And at that point, and then you see the cop, and I'm like, and it's in a strip mall parking lot. There's not too many places to go.
What?
And all of a sudden, I'm thinking, I want out, because if this guy's really crazy and armed, he's going to get out of that car and start shooting.
Well, that's the other thing.
way to help out.
Yeah. You
Right?
don't,
You know
don't
what I
mess
mean?
with people
I mean,
in cars.
I would have had to
How'd you
run.
get out and help out?
I would have had to run the red lights and stuff to get through there too. But no. But at that point, you're like, okay, yeah, this is a police matter. I don't want stray bullets flying.
Did you at
It's-
least deploy some StarTacs
Yeah.
so he
Yeah.
couldn't get out of the
No,
strip
I
mall
pressed the
without
button.
blowing his
I
tires?
pressed the button, and an oil slick came out the back.
Speaking
nice.
of not helping out, we were on the highway.
DB5.
We were on the highway in Maine coming back from vacation. It was one of those things where, you're watching your rearview mirror and you're like, boy, that guy's driving really erratically, and wow, he's going really fast. And so we're kind of watching him, and I'm naturally in the left lane because I drive fast, and he's just weaving in and out, and there was a horse trailer, people pulling the horses.
Oh, jeez.
So it's literally right next to us. He smacks that, swerves in front of me. I managed to go around him and took out like 3 more cars, big pile up. And then I had to think, do I stop to make sure everyone's okay, or do I keep going to the toll booth to notify 911? Because I didn't have my cell phone.
I thought you said
So I kept
pre-cell
going.
phone.
I kept going, and I got to the toll booth. I'm like, hey, there's a big pile up behind me.
No OnStar? How long ago was this?
Oh, God, it was years ago. But it was one of those things where it's like, I'm not sitting around waiting for this next.
But you did.
I wanted to get home.
But you did call.
Well, I used it as an excuse to benefit myself. I'll fully admit that I wanted to get home. It was the first 2 hours of a 16-hour drive. So,
Well, I was trying to get here too, but that wasn't why I was worried about it. I was just,
I was okay.
These days.
And I figured people
right.
stop behind them were going to help out. They have much better skills than I do because I have 0.
The other lesson here is don't stop at Wild Bill's on your way to the show.
Okay.
Good point.
Yeah, that's a good lesson.
Oh man, the geeks have inherited the earth.
Did I do that?
What a dork.
Does him wanting to play with us again mean that he's turning into a geek, or we're turning into cool guys?
So if you're a marine biologist, I gotta believe, like the best day of your life would be when some wildlife makes its way into your home, and you can have a close-up.
Unless you're pretending to be one like Costanza.
Oh yes. Although
Is there a marine biologist?
he did get
did.
that golf ball out of that is one of my favorite ends of Seinfeld when he just holds it up and then
The
Kramer
look on
goes,
Kramer's.
"Is it a Titleist?"
Sorry, I mean to interrupt the story, but whenever I hear marine biologist, I immediately go to George.
The sea was very angry that day, my friends. Like an old man sending back cold soup. Yeah. Oh, that was awesome. Anyways, Phil Ross is a marine biologist in New Zealand, and his home was invaded by a baby seal. This intruder flopped around the house, engaged in a standoff with the family cat, and generally caused a ruckus, none of which Ross witnessed. He says the big joke is that this is really the only family emergency where it would be useful to have a marine biologist in the house. I really missed my time to shine. So while you were removing Titleists from the blowhole of a great, some sort of whale, I don't know what they have in New Zealand, instead of being at home to protect your family from this vicious but adorable sea creature, Phil Ross, you're our Geek of the Week.
There's an all-night party in room 7609. And you can dance together all night if you've got the time.
And what a jerk George Costanza is, because
the worst.
He's always pretending he's an architect. Then he picks something else. The one time he picked something else, and
Importer, exporter, marine biologist.
oh no, I forgot. That's right. He
Always lied.
I was just about to
wanted
ask
to be
you,
my latex salesman.
I was just about to ask you if you're okay, because that was so quick, the Geek of the Week. But I didn't realize we were carrying over to the next segment.
Well, I was waiting for Michael to finish his explanation as to whether or not he was worried about the FBI's image being hurt, and I think he was.
Oh, you're right. That's pot calling the kettle black.
So, yes, indeed. It's just, we're all self-incriminated here. We're continuing our Dark Wave month here in August when the sun's shining. We thought we'd bring a little shadow to the end of the summer. And we're playing some newer bands. They are kind of post-New Wave, but they are evocative of New Wave. And so we welcome Ego Prism to the New Wave suite with Once You Get There.